Welcome back to the Caucus Corner, the podcast where policy meets the people. I am your host, Assemblywoman Mikhail Salaj, chair of the Black, Puerto Rican, Hispanic, and Asian Legislative Caucus. Every episode, we shine a light on the issues shaping communities of color and give a voice to the leaders working to make a difference. Today, we're tackling a crisis that's reached far beyond New York: gun violence. Every life lost to gun violence is a stark reminder that we failed to protect the most basic human right, the right to live. We see this play out over and over again, especially in neighborhoods that have long been under-resourced and segregated by race and income. That's why members of the caucus have joined forces through our gun violence prevention subcommittee, working together to uplift communities that bear the brunt of this crisis and bring real, lasting change. Before we dive in, I'm honored to introduce our guest for today's conversation. First, I'd like to kick it off to the Queen of Harlem. That's my own personal name for her, Senator Cordell Clear.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Senator Clear. I represent the 30th District, which is West Harlem, Central Harlem, East Harlem, El Barrio, a portion of the Upper West Side, and a small piece of Washington Heights. Chair of the Senate Aging Committee. I'm also newly co-chair of the Caucus Anti-Gun Violence Subcommittee. And long before my time as an elected official, I was a community activist fighting for equity, permanently affordable housing, educational excellence, and all the things that I would describe really as antidotes to gun violence. So thank you. That's my introduction.
Thank you, Senator, for joining us in this important conversation. Next, we have Monisha from Everytown for gun safety. Give us a quick introduction.
Thanks for inviting me and having me here today. As you said, I'm Monisha Henley. I'm Senior Vice President of Government Affairs here at Everytown for Gun Safety. We are one of the largest gun violence prevention organizations here in the country. We're also headquartered in New York. I have been working on this issue for about 7 years professionally, but this is a very personal issue to me, and I also am proud to call New York home.
We thank you for being on the line. Next, we have Christian. Hey, how are we doing?
Hi, yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Assembly Member, for having me. I am Christian Matthew. I serve as the National Youth and College President for the National Action Network under the leadership of Reverend Dr. Al Sharpton, one of the leading civil rights organizations. And as Monisha said, this is also a very personal topic for me, and I'm so glad to be here to partake in this conversation.
Well, we appreciate you being on the line. And we know that for decades, Black men have been disproportionately impacted by gun violence. And studies show that every 1 out of 50 Black men in Rochester, places where you might not think there is a mass amount of gun violence, but it exists, between the ages of 18 to 24 were killed or injured because of gun violence. And we see these disparities, and we know that communities of color are greatly impacted. So what are we doing now as both policymakers and advocates to unify ourselves, to break down the barriers and drive down these racial disparities that exist in gun violence?
Thank you for that question, Chair. You know, there's clearly a nexus between communities that have been discriminated against for generations in terms of freedom, housing, education, finances, and so much more, and the incidence of gun violence. And as the state looks at things like reparations on a global level, we have to lead with the message that gun violence is a public health and public policy problem that will require generational investment. So as we come together, and this is now more a part of our conversation, understanding the relationship between things, I think that the awareness is growing and the direction is becoming more, clear as to where we need to go. The solutions are out there, and it's our job to have the courage and the conviction to invest in long-term solutions that will empower our people. I know in my district, I can't pour enough resources into groups like Harlem Mothers Saved and Street Corner Resources, Getting Out and Staying Out, Living Redemption, but we also have to And this has been happening. This is us talking to educators, mental health service providers, advocates, elected officials, even law enforcement, and really coming together to get rid of this very stubborn problem of gun violence in our communities.
And from, a policy, a nonprofit aspect, what are your two organizations, Monisha and Christian, are doing to really close these disparities and acknowledge that this actually exists?
Sure. One of the things I think it's important to, acknowledge, and the senator said this already, is like really digging into the root causes. Gun violence doesn't happen in a vacuum, and it is so important when we're having this conversation to not just look at the outcome, but to look at the symptom, right? Like, this is rooted in justice and health and housing and education systems that have shaped, years and years of, frankly, discrimination, which has made Black and Brown communities more at risk to gun violence. And one of the things that Everytown really looks at is focusing in two areas, right? Like, what are the emerging threats? So what are the new things that are happening? Everything from like the gun industry to targeting Black and Brown communities, to profiting off of lives that are lost in those communities, to also looking at root causes, and really making sure that we're focusing on the community. And one of the things that I'm proud of is that Everytown created a community safety fund, which is a C3 arm that really works to provide grants and funding to those groups and organizations that are on the ground, that have connections to the communities most impacted, who are, familiar to them, and really making sure that those programs are continuing to exist and are properly funded, especially when we're in a time where the federal government is putting these types of programs under risk.
And also, lastly, I just want to echo, as both the senator and Monisha said, is that dealing with root causes is very, very important. When dealing with gun violence, we cannot just think about gun violence as a surface level issue, which is what a lot of people have begun to do, and people are becoming basically numb to the issue of gun violence. That because gun violence is happening so much every day, and it's happening at alarming rates. Young people are dying at the hands of guns higher than any other, especially Black and Brown children. I think that is something that we really need to deal with, is the root causes, and really lifting up community. That is something that we do here at NAN, is that we always lift up community. Especially recently here at NAN, we just lost a member of the National Action Network in the person of Mama Z. Mama Z was a longtime member of NAN. She was a volunteer. I had the opportunity to work with her during our last convention, and she went outside of her building and lost her life due to senseless acts of gun violence. But one thing that NAN did, not only did we stand with that family, but what we did was that we brought community together. And that is something that I think is very important when you're dealing with situations of gun violence, is dealing with root causes. But while you're dealing with root causes, go back into the communities to begin to uplift them and empower them at the same time.
Yeah, Christian, I think that's very good that you pointed that out, and not just uplift, but also deal with the trauma. When you look at statistics like the Brady United Against Gun Violence group, the not-for-profit organization put out, though we account for 14% of the United States population, yet Black people account for 60% of those killed by firearm homicide each year. That's alarming. That's beyond alarming. On average, Black people are over 11.5 times likely to be victims of firearm homicide than non-Hispanic white people. Of course, it's even greater when you're talking about white people. This is something that I think it's like so many other things, because of the communities that it affects. The alarm just has not been sounded. And those are staggering statistics. If that were anything else, if 60% of the dogs were being killed in this country by gun violence, I think we would get a different reaction. And it does come down to race when you talk about deprivation, and you talk about poverty, and you talk about under education and under resourced communities. So I just really wanted to add on to that, that we have to really look at it from that lens.
Senator, I couldn't agree more. I think it is so important, the piece that both you and Christian just acknowledged, that we have become numb and we have started to feel like this is normal in this country when it shouldn't be. And then the other piece you just said, when we were discussing the opioid epidemic, when it was really kind of coming to light and rising, we probably could have all told stories about how this was impacting at least my community. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware, and I saw like the devastation of opioids for years and years. But when it really started to look different and it wasn't just Black and brown bodies that were impacted, all of a sudden we took it seriously. And that's the exact same conversation we have to have about gun violence. That this does not have to be our normal. This does not have to be the way that we are living. And that, frankly, our communities are being targeted in a different way than others are.
And I definitely want to uplift something that was mentioned quickly, especially on a federal level. We are seeing the closure of the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention and many cuts to community-based violence intervention grants from the U.S. Department of Justice. And so I know that local groups, those community-based groups are actually engaging folks and talking about the issues of poverty are now being impacted. But I'm glad that at least in this last budget cycle, we were able to codify the state's Office of Gun Violence Prevention. So I want to thank you, Senator, and also Monique Tyler Waterman, who's also the co-chair of the subcommittee on gun violence, and talking about that impact of how we mitigate it on the ground level and really, from community to community, from folks to folks, try to solve this issue and bring more resources. But we do have to also talk about the fact that the gun industry knows about issues with their guns, right? And they haven't been doing what they needed to do to make sure that the sale of their pistols are not easily converted into illegal machine guns. And so I know that I have a bill with Senator Myrie looking at how we can go through and stop these conversion of illegal machine guns through the use of Glock switches or fancy MCDs, which is machine gun conversion devices. And so I know, Senator, you've been helping me, but have you seen these devices in your community? Have you, talked about this with your constituents?
Certainly, I've heard about this happening, and thank you to you and Senator Myrie for bringing this legislation. I think I was one of the very first to co-sponsor this bill. I fully support Senator Myrie's efforts to pass it and believe in 2026 we can help get that bill across the finish line. There's no excuse for any type of product being made with the intent and collusion of manufacturers who are ambivalent at best about their product being used to slaughter people. It is unconscionable. And we do have to have that addressed. And on that Office of Gun Violence Prevention, I just want to shout out again, Assemblymember Waterman Chandler and my predecessor in this new co-chairmanship, Senator Myrie, for making sure that New York State established that, taking the lead on that, and of course, all of us supporting it. And I believe, in fact, they're signing the bill today in Brooklyn, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so good. That's some good work. But in terms of your bill, we want to see that signed as well. We have to definitely make sure that these things out here, because already, really, we have we're behind. We're playing catch up because now guns are being printed. We are not. The legislation is not keeping up with it. Not that we aren't putting it out there or introducing it, but it's not being codified quickly enough, and we're allowing these processes to happen. And we know just from the iron pipeline, we knew that. We knew it. We've been aware of that. Now we're looking at technology. We're aware. What are we doing about it? And that's what I think groups like Everytown and others, ourselves, that's what our focus has to be, to making them move on this issue. And you're absolutely right about the opioids, and this is exactly the same thing.
Yeah. And you can see that law enforcement has recovered so many of these devices, whether it's in Buffalo, Brooklyn, Poughkeepsie, Queens. There's been, I think, I heard the Bureau of Alcohol and Tobacco and Firearms reports over 31,000 of these machine gun converter devices recovered in the past 5 years. So this is not just like a coincidence. It's really manufacturers ignoring the risk. And so next session, I definitely will engage you folks to see if or to get this across the finish line, because our communities, really, this is ground zero in our communities, because folks are getting their hands on these products and, committing mass shootings, and we are falling victim of it. So I know that when we talk about like on the ground, finding out what we could do for our communities, I know Everytown, you've been working very hard to ensure that, whether it's pistol converters, ghost guns are taken off the street. And so I know that, we are having these conversations. So what's going on? Like, what do you see? How can we engage? How can folks engage with your groups to solve this crisis?
Sure. Well, I mean, you already talked about a huge part of what can be done, which is, working on these types of policies. I think it's so important to acknowledge that for decades, Glock and smaller number of other gun makers have created these devices. They manufactured these pistols and made them intentionally in a way that are easily convertible into an illegal do-it-yourself machine gun. You're talking about a firearm that is able to essentially shoot off about 1,200 rounds per minute, which is actually crazy. And what does that mean for our community safety? And you already acknowledged how these switches are being found in mass numbers in Buffalo and Suffolk County. And so you're already taking a huge step forward. And if we zoom out a little bit, New York is kind of ahead of the game in a lot of ways. We're just now seeing states like Alabama and Tennessee and Mississippi, and most recently Oregon banning the switches. But I think the part that is so important to emphasize is that it's not enough to ban the switches. You have to look at the industry that is creating a easily convertible firearm. So I think the piece that is important here is for more people to know about this, to understand the policy, for us to educate the public and the communities, for it to really feel like this is all of our problem, so that the next time you all are in session, there is like a groundswell from the state saying, we demand this policy to be making it to the governor's desk immediately. Right now, California is working on a very similar policy. And in fact, tomorrow, they will be getting their first Senate hearing on the bill. They've already passed it through their assembly. And, New York should, like California, beat them at this. So I think it's just making sure we're talking about it, we're educating folks on it. And if you're looking to find ways to plug in, join moms, join students, join the survivors that are part of Everytown. And you can easily do that by texting 64433 to join. Or texting ready. Both of them will plug you into our movement so that you can have a part of, hopefully, this historical moment of addressing do-it-yourself machine guns.
And I know, Senator, you're working on a couple of other bills regarding this issue.
Yeah, one of the bills that I'm looking at that I really want to do is, it's not guns directly, but I want to regulate the use of 3D printers and actually call for a background check before you can purchase one that is capable of making a gun. I'm a proud member of the Senate Democratic Conference, which, since we took over the majority in 2019, we have advanced nation-leading legislation to tackle gun violence, including the 10-day waiting period for the purchase of any firearm, and preventing those with certain criminal convictions from purchasing ammunition. Notably, the Senate did codify the Gun Violence Prevention Office and strengthen Operation Snug to help address gun violence in communities, and require that victims of firearm violence be provided with psychiatric care. All of these things are legislation that we're putting forward because it's a multi-layered problem. and it's going to have to be a multi-layered solution to it. But right now, I've had several incidences of young people. They're making these guns now. And we have to deal with the software providers and or the machine distributors so that we can try to find a way to control who has it, or at least know who has this capability. Because they're ready to just skip over the guy that's just comes and sells the guns now. You don't even have to do that. In some cases, you have them being made in your own community through these devices that have been set up to do that. So, that's important for us to do and continue highlighting awareness in our communities and making people, pay attention to it. This is just, I don't think I know a family that hasn't been impacted. That's not normal. That's not the way life is supposed to be. That people actually know people, have been to funerals of people, or we don't talk about often how many people have been injured by gun violence. Many die, but many don't. We have paraplegics, quadriplegics, people who have lost limbs and other things that are really damaged because of gun violence.
If I may add something to both the senator's point and Mohisha's point, is that when we're dealing with gun violence, and we already spoke about root causes, but now dealing with the evolution of dealing with gun violence also, ghost guns is a very, very big issue, and I'm glad that the senator and other leaders are dealing with it. And today I'm also, when this Zoom call is over, I'll be heading over to witness the signing of the Office to Prevent Gun Violence, which we helped Senator Myrie with, but also dealing with ghost guns, I think, is very, very key. Back in 2022, I lost a friend due to gun violence. She was leaving school. Her name was Angela Yambo, and she was killed with a ghost gun. And these ghost guns have the capabilities of, even more than regular guns, because they are not, they don't go through the same manufacturing as other guns. These can be done right in our homes, right in your backyard, right in your schools, right in your community, and you just don't know it. But then not only do we need to deal with ghost guns, but we also need to continue to speak about the supply of where these guns are coming from, which is what I think a lot of people miss and a lot of people don't think about, is where are these guns coming from? New York State has some of the largest and strict gun laws, not to prohibit people from having guns, but to make sure that people are using common sense when they are having guns, which is what I think a lot of people forget, is that, yes, it is your right to bear arms, but you should be using it common sensely, and that you shouldn't just be having a gun to use it against people. That's not right. But dealing with also where these guns are coming from, how they are getting into our communities is another big thing that I think people should also deal with. Yes, ghost guns is very important. I agree with it. I stand with it. But also dealing with where are these guns coming from? How are they getting into our communities? Because these are the guns that are killing our children. These are the guns that are killing our communities, which is why I'm so glad that the senator is dealing with ghost guns. But now, as we're dealing with ghost guns, we also need to speak with the trafficking of these guns in our communities as well.
Thank you to our guests for sharing their insight and for the work you do every day to prevent gun violence and heal our communities. And also thank you to you, the listener, for tuning in to this vital conversation. I'm proud to lead the effort, like my bill to ban the sale of pistols that can easily be converted into machine guns, because no one should have to live in fear of weapons of war in our neighborhoods. So let's keep working together for safer, stronger communities for everyone. If this episode inspires you, I encourage you to get involved, reach out to lawmakers, support local gun violence prevention programs, and use your voice to demand change. And also, don't forget to subscribe. Until next time, take care, and thank you for listening to the Caucus Corner.